James Meredith thinks about leaving the University of Mississippi, and his decision is a subject of presidential concern.
College is difficult enough under any conditions. He's been subjected to a good deal of harassment, and anyone who has been going through his experience in college would find it difficult to continue. I hope he continues. If he doesn't, that's a loss not only to Mr. Meredith, but I think the University of Mississippi.
Harvey Gant talks about entering a college in South Carolina.
I expect that no outsiders will cause any trouble. Now, as far as the students are concerned, it would probably be naive on my part to expect 100% acceptance from all of the students. However, I hope that by the time I graduate, that I will be just accepted as another student on the campus.
The original Supreme Court decision on desegregation, almost 9 years ago, said that separate schools could never be considered equal because separation itself put the Negro student under a psychological handicap. If that is true, then Negroes are still operating under a handicap because the psychological attitudes of segregation are being maintained even where integration has been made a fact. Many white people in the South consider this proper and inevitable. Many Negroes consider it necessary, though painful, and not without promise. But others are becoming impatient at the degree to which the old framework still holds. What it has meant at Mississippi, what it may mean in South Carolina. This is the subject of tonight's Eyewitness. Your correspondent, Walter Cronkite, substituting for Charles Collingwood, who wisely picked this freezing week to take a vacation down where the sun still shines.
Eyewitness, the drama of big events. Tonight, witness the color line on campus. Brought to you by the CBS Television Network.
A solitary student on a campus overflowing with school spirit. This has been the life of James Meredith for the last 4 months. As the only Negro at the University of Mississippi, he walks alone, lives alone, with rare exceptions, eats alone at a table apart from his fellow students at the college cafeteria. This week on the guarded campus of Ole Miss was the final week of mid-year exams, a quiet week. After exams, some students would be going home for a breather between semesters. On the morning of his last exam, James Meredith packed his things into his car, ready to leave the campus afterwards, as he has always done on weekends, going home to his wife in the city of Jackson or visiting his attorney. But this time he had announced publicly he might not be coming back, not unless the pressure on him eased up, a statement that brought a new flare-up of harassment. His car, a 10-year-old Cadillac, bears the scars of one recent incident. Reminders of tension, of the violence that tried to block his enrollment are still here. The campus still under watch by 300 federal soldiers. Meredith himself still being trailed by his federal bodyguards as he went in to take that last exam, English literature. Meredith's major field is political science. Up until exams, his grades apparently have not been good, though he's in no real academic trouble. But has the experiment accomplished anything toward desegregation? Correspondent Dan Rather talked to some of Meredith's fellow students.
What about the possibility that another Negro, or possibly more, will enroll next fall?
Well, I don't believe that there will be any violence as there was before this phase has passed. I think we have let our voice be known. I think this part of it is gone. I think from now on it will be a passive resistance, a non-acceptance course is, I think, what most everybody here on campus will follow.
But you don't think the next Negro will get along any better,
No.
have any easier time?
No, sir, he won't have any easier time as far as speaking to people, as far as being accepted as a normal and regular student. No, sir.
How long is it going to be before a Negro walking on the campus at the University of Mississippi will attract no attention?
Well, you could say that it may be a generation. I know that I am better prepared to accept something like this than my parents were and the parents of other students on the campus. We have been, of course, put through this, and we have to loosen up our beliefs a little because it has happened to us. To say exactly how long it will take, I couldn't say, though. I will say this, that I do not believe that the cause for integration has been strengthened any whatsoever thus far.
The University Chancellor, Dr. John D. Williams.
Usually in these kind of situations, there are some lessons to be learned. Can you think of any lessons that you feel have been learned here?
Well, I think the most important lesson is that Mississippi, with all of its governmental resources, cannot resist successfully the will and the power of the federal government.
What is likely to be the effect on the university as a whole if James Meredith never returns?
If Mr. Meredith leaves, the purpose of the university hasn't changed. Its goals haven't changed. The faculty will be back at work, attempting to do a better job even. The students will be back accomplishing their own purpose. And so I cannot see that there will be much change on the campus of the University of Mississippi, whether Mr. Meredith comes back or whether he leaves.
This is where Meredith went this week to weigh his decision. A new apartment house in Jackson, Mississippi, where his wife and 3-year-old son are living. Here at home last evening, Meredith talked with Dan Rather, but declined to discuss his big decision. The impression was that he hadn't yet made up his own mind. But on other matters, the Merediths talked freely.
What were your purposes in wanting to enroll at the university?
Well, of course, the reasons are many. Of course, first and foremost, I've felt always that every citizen, including Negroes, should have the right to receive whatever training is offered by the states. And of course, in Mississippi, the Negro does not have the privilege of receiving all of the educational training that was being offered by the state. And of course, this, I think, has to be corrected.
I'd ask you how you feel, or what's your reaction to the claims that the NAACP is paying you, that you're simply an employee or a tool of the NAACP?
Well, of course, the NAACP depends on its source of support from contributions and from memberships. And I don't think they're in the business of paying anybody except their employees. But I certainly do feel now, have always felt, that the existence, particularly in this case, of the legal section of the NAACP Legal and Educational Fund was very, very important in this case, because they knew all of the the steps necessary to go through the courts. And of course, they went through the courts, and without that, of course, we certainly wouldn't be where we are. Certainly, they had an important role in this.
Now that you have one semester behind you, a full semester, How much of what you set out to do you feel you've accomplished?
Well, I've always felt that the first step in solving any problem is to identify the problem. And at the very least, I think that the problem, the racial problem that exists in this country, particularly in Mississippi, has been revealed.
The desegregation problem and Meredith's own part in it was acknowledged yesterday in the highest quarters. President Kennedy at his news conference.
The federal government has already spent more than $4 million on the enforcement of the desegregation orders at the University of Mississippi. To this point, do you consider that effort worth it? And would you consider it to be an effort that had failed if for some reason Mr. Meredith had to leave the university during this winter?
Well, it's not only $4 million, but it was, of course, 2 people were killed and a good many were wounded. And it was it's had wide repercussions, and some of them have been unfortunate. However, if the United States government had failed to exert its influence to protect Mr. Meredith, if Mr. Meredith had been denied admission by force, or if he had suffered a physical attack, that would have been far more expensive. And this country, of course, cannot survive if the United States government and the executive branch does not carry out the decisions of the court. It might be a decision in this case which some people may not agree with. Next time, it might be another matter, and this government would unravel very fast. So there's no question in my mind that the United States the executive branch had to take the action that it did. I'd be sorry if Mr. Meredith leaves. College is difficult enough under any conditions. He's been subjected to a good deal of harassment, and anyone who has been gone through his experience in college would find it difficult to continue. I hope he continues. If he doesn't, that's a loss not only to Mr. Meredith, but I think the University of Mississippi.
The stakes in James Meredith's decision, according to President Kennedy. Whatever Meredith decides, the students of Ole Miss, as we heard them say a few minutes ago, feel desegregation has not been advanced at all by his experience, which may be true as far as Southern convictions are concerned. Yet the air seems to have been cleared of 2 obstructions. Any doubts about the federal government's willingness to go all the way to enforce court orders have been dispelled, and violence has failed as a means of protest. And these 2 facts seem to have cast the pattern for another historic case, a case in the state of South Carolina, which up till now has resisted even a single token step toward desegregation. It doesn't have a single Negro in a single white school or college. This week, in an attitude of opposition no less profound than Mississippi's, but in an atmosphere of calm, South Carolina is preparing to yield to the courts and take that first step. It has agreed to enroll a 20-year-old Negro named Harvey B. Gant, a student of architecture transferring from Iowa State to Clemson College in Clemson, South Carolina. The Clemson campus was once a plantation owned by the great exponent of states' rights, John C. Calhoun. The theory survives. To keep young Gant off this campus, it fought federal government in the courts, but as the outgoing governor said, we have run out of courts. The new governor now prepares to accept the federal orders. Clemson is co-ed, but just barely. It has 4,200 men and 92 women. Correspondent Hughes Rudd asked for some views on the admittance of Harvey Gant, first from the Dean of Students.
Do you think there's going to be any trouble when he comes over?
Well, I certainly hope not. We have fine student leadership. We have discussed this matter for a number of months about the possibility, and Clemson is first and foremost an educational institution, and our students put this objective first, and I hope they will continue to place first things first.
Well, Mr. Hendricks, you're president of the student body. How do the students feel?
Well, I think that we've decided that we're going to accept it calmly.
Why?
Well, in my opinion, we've had a good while to think about this. We've all known it was coming. And we've decided that we want to do what's in the best interest of Clemson and the state of South Carolina and the United States as a whole. we're up here primarily to get an education, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, how do you think Gant is going to be received? Will he be able to live on campus without any trouble and so on?
Well, I don't think he's going to have any trouble now. But I don't know whether he'll have any friends, but as far as trouble goes, we're not going to give him any trouble at all, that I can see.
The students in Clemson, I don't think the majority of them are happy to see integration, but they're willing to accept it in a mature manner.
Will he be able to live on campus in the dormitory, that kind of thing?
I believe he will. He will, yeah.
Without firecrackers being thrown at him and all that kind of thing?
I think so.
There'll be a certain amount of harassment, more or less in the form of catcalls and so forth, but I don't think it'll be anything like it was in Mississippi.
You don't anticipate any
mass demonstrations?
No. I suppose that's the word for it.
No, I don't. I believe we're mature enough here at Clemson College to see that mass demonstrations will get us nowhere.
The student-to-be, Harvey Gant of Charleston, South Carolina. He was a junior at Iowa State with a B average. He's due to enroll at Clemson next month.
Well, Mr. Gant, why do you want to go to Clemson College?
Well, I decided that I wanted to go to Clemson after spending my freshman year, or part of my freshman year at Iowa State. I decided I wanted to go to school in the South. I thought I loved the South more than I liked the Midwestern climate, so I decided I'd come back to South Carolina.
Was this all your own idea, or were you led into it by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People?
I'm glad you asked that. I should probably clarify here that this was completely my brainchild. I thought of it at Iowa during my freshman year, and no one has influenced me. No one. And naturally, when I saw that it was going to involve a lawsuit, I got the services of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I mean, they're lawyers, and they do have a pretty good team of lawyers, and they did a really good job.
Well, how do you think you will be received by the students? Peacefully, I'm sure, but do you think they're really going to accept you, or is it going to be a standoff kind of thing, or what?
As you said, I really expect to go in peacefully. I don't expect any great deal of fanfare. At least I would hope there won't be any great deal of fanfare. I expect that no outsiders will cause any trouble. Now, as far as the students are concerned, it would probably be naive on my part to expect 100% acceptance from all of the students. However, I hope that by the time I graduate, that I will be just accepted as another student on the campus.
For Negroes on southern campuses, acceptance still seems a long way off. James Meredith's experience at Ole Miss seems to underline that fact. The best, apparently, that a Negro student can expect is to be left alone, which is not the same thing. It is, however, what this generation of Negroes has settled for as the price of cracking the color line in education. How it works out over the longer run can be seen in the case of still another Deep South college, the University of Georgia. In January 1961, in an atmosphere of tension that exploded into serious demonstrations, Georgia reluctantly admitted two Negroes, a boy named Hamilton Holmes and a girl named Charlene Hunter. Recently, eyewitness reporter Lou Wood went to visit them and find out how they were getting along 2 years later. Charlene Hunter, journalism student, at first had rocks thrown at her dormitory window, but things are much different now.
What is the general situation now as far as your attending the University of Georgia is concerned? Is it still pretty difficult, or has it improved in any way?
I think on an academic level it's remained about the same. I've had to study just as hard now as I studied when I first came, even though I've adjusted better to my instructors and professors. Socially, there hasn't been too much change. There haven't been too many advances made by the students. However, there have been some, and many of the students whom I met when I first came have continued to be friendly, and we've developed some fairly strong friendships, so that I think I could say that we move about the campus with relative ease without fear of having to be stopped by some agitator.
Are the girls or the boys more likely to associate with you, to be more friendly?
Well, it depends upon the circumstances and the setting. I find I'm a journalism major, and I find in the journalism school, when they begin to treat you like a fella, you know, one of the gang, then there's no difference between the fellas and the girls. In social situations, I think sometimes the girls may be more sensitive to the girl who has to stand on the sidelines and not dance or something like this, so they usually come forward and make small talk. But I think it's been about even, really.
Hamilton Holmes, a senior and an A student. Next year, he'll become the first Negro at Emory University Medical School.
Well, on top of this rough academic schedule, how rough has life been for you at the University of Georgia since you arrived?
Well, the biggest problem that I have faced is the problem of loneliness. I don't have too many companions, either on campus or off.
Have you noticed any changes in the attitudes of the student body in regards to you since you've been here for the year and a half?
The students have always been fair, and they've always treated us courteous in the classroom. But then outside the class, that's a different thing altogether.
What happens outside the classroom?
Well, biggest adjustment that I have had to make is this one. People will talk to you in the confines of a classroom, and then say 10 or 15 minutes after that, after you get on the outside of the classroom, and these same people will turn their heads to keep from recognizing you. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a thing, well, you have to get used to.
What kinds of things have happened? What incidents or problems have taken place over the past year and a half?
I found one day when I came out that my car had been purposely jammed in. There were 2 cars. Well, there was one in front, and there was one behind me, and then there was a 3rd car on the side of me. So, well, they had me pretty well tied in, and I couldn't move. So, just at that instant, I just happened to glance up at the fraternity house, and I noticed that there were some boys in the window, and they seemed to be having a lot of fun. So I figured that then they had something to do with the situation that I was in. So I proceeded to just get in the cars, and I rolled them down. And by the time that I had rolled the 2nd car down, then about 20 boys came out of the fraternity house. So they came up to me, and well, see, this little fellow asked me, was that my car that I had just gotten out of? And I told him, well, that I wasn't. I mean, that it wasn't, but that it was blocking me in, and that it seems to have been done on purpose. So I was just, just rolling it down a little. Well, all the while I was trying to keep cool, but I was slowly becoming angry. And this guy, I guess he was about 5'4", 5'5". He's a little guy, and he was very arrogant. So he continued to walk up on me. And I guess he was about 2 or 3 yards in front of other boys. And then as he eased up on me, then they would come up behind him. So I did get kind of frightened because at that moment I didn't know what they were anticipating. So I decided then that I had better do something to kind of get them to leave me alone. And the first thing that I could think about was to give them the impression that I had some sort of a weapon in my car. So I don't know what I did then, was to, I raised my voice a little at the guy for the first time. And I told him that I didn't want to be bothered, that I wouldn't bother anybody, and I didn't want anybody to bother me. And so I asked him to go. So that brought some laughs and some remarks. So I said, well, if you won't let me go, I'm going to have to show you that I mean business. So I went to my car, and I said that I'll just go and just carry this on out. So I went to my glove compartment, and all I had in there was a flashlight. But I made sure that I let them see me go into my glove compartment and get something out and put it in my overcoat. So after doing that, then I got back out of the car, and I kept my hand down in my coat. So I said, all right, now I've asked you to leave me alone. And if you want to start any trouble now, I'm ready for it. So I think they kind of took it to heart, and all of them backed up. And they waited, and they watched as I pulled off. And really, for the first time since I had been here, that I had really gained some respect. And although I didn't want it to be that way, it just seems as if that's the way they would have to be. But as I drove off, there was complete silence. And I came back that next day, and I parked. I didn't have any trouble, so I started coming back every day.
Since that incident last year, Hamilton Holmes hasn't had any trouble. And since he and Miss Hunter were enrolled 2 years ago, 6 more Negro students have been admitted to the University of Georgia without trouble. So that slow and painful thing called desegregation crawls on. Just today in Louisiana, a private university, Tulane, voluntarily registered 7 Negroes, the first 7. Altogether, throughout the South, some 7,000 Negroes now attend colleges that used to be all white. In most cases, what they have been given is enrollment, not acceptance, only the right to be left alone. At the University of Mississippi, James Meredith has been alone among 4,700 white students. At Clemson, Harvey Gantt will be alone among 4,292. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
Eyewitness, the color line on campus, has been brought to you by the CBS Television Network. Next Friday and every Friday at this same time for the drama of big events, keep an eye on Eyewitness. This broadcast, pre-recorded, is produced by CBS News, which has sole responsibility for the news judgments, the content, and editing. This is Harry Kramer speaking.